So the setup is the first important step. The base usage we also kind of saw already, though there's a bit more to that. But what's also important is configuring Claude Code or knowing how to configure it. And regarding that, you get a couple of options. You can configure Claude Code globally on your system. Actually, as an enterprise, you can even configure it for all your team members, but here we'll focus on individual installations on a system. So then you can configure it globally. For example, here on Mac, I have a global .claude folder on my system in my current user's home directory. In there is a bunch of stuff, but one of the things in there is a settings.json file. And when you open that settings file, you'll be able to set up some global settings. You can also tweak those settings though from inside Claude Code. If you run /config, it'll bring up that configuration menu where you can browse through the various settings it has and the current values, and also change those values. For example, if you want to change that theme you initially picked, you can select that here, bring up that theme picker in this case, and choose a different theme, though I'll stay with the default dark mode here. And you can do that for all these settings. For example, if you want to save tokens and you know you don't have complex tasks, you could turn off thinking mode and set this to false. And you'll see that now, for example, in this global settings file here, this always thinking enabled value here changed to false and is now set to false because I made this change in my Claude CLI. Because whenever you change a config there, it's by default, at least right now when I'm recording this, editing the global settings. Now, Claude Code has a long list of available settings, which of course also changes over time as features are added, changed, and so on. Attached, you therefore find a link to the official documentation so that you can see the most recent version of that list. One setting which I find important, which is not set by default, at least right now when I'm recording this, is this permissions setting here, though. Here you can allow or deny certain things. And you wanna deny Claude Code reading your .env files, for example, where you might be keeping secrets or other kind of sensitive information you don't want Claude Code to read. And the way this permissions system works is such that you specify the tool Claude Code may be using, and there are various built-in tools, but the most important ones for this context are read and write and bash, which allow Claude, you guessed it, to read or write or execute bash commands. And you can then specify some restrictions essentially related to which files you want to deny using these tools. Because of course I don't want to generally deny Claude Code from using the read or write tools, but I want to deny it using these tools on any files stored anywhere that are called .env. And that is in the end what this rule setup here should achieve. Now I'll switch always thinking enabled back to true here, by the way, because I want it to use thinking mode. Another place where settings can be stored is inside of your project folder. So here in this next folder. In there, you can add a .claude folder, and in there you can also add a settings.json file. And then in here you can set up Claude settings that will override the global settings for this project. You can also add a settings.local.json file, which will also be a project-specific settings file that will override the global settings, and that will also override the settings from this settings.json file. And the idea behind settings.local is simply that it's not checked into source control. So it's not part of your GitHub repository, for example, so that individual users, if you're in a team and you're working on a project, each user can have their own settings that extend or override parts of the project-specific or global settings.